Hey, hello everybody. Welcome back to part 5 with guest Captain Randy Cramer, learning about your non-humanoid galactic neighbors. Captain Randy Cramer, super soldier for the U.S. Marine Corps, Special Sections, is back, and he, as most of you know by now, has been on the Intergalactic Space Station conversing peacefully with non-humanoid extraterrestrials, as well as on Mars. Today, Randy is here to share his experiences, expertise, and knowledge of insectoids, antids, tree frogs, cephalopods, avians, aquatics, raptors, reptilians, centipedes, etc. So welcome back, Randy.
Oh, thanks for having me. Excuse me. Thanks for having me, Merrily.
No problem. It's fun to have you always. So how about we do this for a general plan, if this works for you, that I will name, for instance, a different humanoid species, but for each one, I'll remind you and have you give 6 specifics briefly about each one. For instance, the classic things most people like to know, like how they look, their speech, their greatest ability or expertise, their longevity, et cetera, et cetera. Does that work for you?
Probably.
Okay. We'll just flow with it and see, okay?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. So let's start with I think first, I understand, if I remember correctly, that there are 2 species that have worked with the Marines. So could you describe the ones, I think they're referred to as the Brawn ones, or the Children of Light? Would you tell people about that?
I mean, they're very old. They're very smart. They tend to be pretty short, like under 4 feet tall. The heads are kind of boxy, pretty big eyes. Reason they're called bronze is because the kind of their skin color is sort of bronzy color. Kind of like a real deep metallic bronze, not like a bronze, tan person, but like a fairly deep metallic kind of bronze sheen to their skin color. Super smart. They live millions of years, like an individual person of their species will live for millions of years. So they have a pretty long-term view of things. Tinkerers, in the sense of those that like to tinker with genetics to improve species. Yeah, they're pretty cool. I like them.
Ooh, they sound neat. Now, did they first contact you, the Marines, and what was the purpose for that? What was their agenda?
I'm not exactly sure who talked to who first, but yeah, their people started talking to our people at some point, and their prime suggestion to us was to spend some time focusing on psionic development and hive mind psionics. So we took that advice and decided to do that, which I think has been to our benefit and everyone's benefit in the long term.
So could you describe what you mean by hive mind?
How do you describe a hive mind? Hive mind, I think the best way that I can describe it is if one were to perceive themselves mentally in their own mental space, but we're also able to perceive on the very perimeter of that mental space other members of the hive mind, and be able to connect with those minds and those experiences, memories, thoughts, etc., and access that information as collective mind, not as singular mind.
Interesting. Now, did that start the Marines? And of course, you were teaching a psionic class, which we'll introduce again. Did that start you and the Marines to move forward on psionic training, brainwave ability?
I would have been before my time, as far as before I was born, but my understanding is, yeah, they took the advice and began a very serious psionic training development program.
Neat. Okay. So now I assume this means you still keep your individuality, Because people have watched so many fiction movies.
No,
they're not
yeah,
thinking like absorbed into the hive mind.
Yeah, fictional, like science fiction hive minds aren't how hive minds work. So even when I remember communicating with insectoids as part of an insectoid hive mind, yes, they still have individuality. They just, and I guess in the sense that something really, really basic, like two different insects in the same hive might have a different flavor that's their favorite or a color that's their favorite. But the main sort of distinction is twofold: the ability to access collective information and to act in collective interest, which also means the inability to act against collective interest. So a member of a hive mind would never do anything against the hive, would never act against the hive, would never threaten the hive, would never threaten anyone else within the hive, and would never betray the hive. Those things would simply not even be possible or ever happen because of hive mind consciousness.
Fascinating and great description. So you're saying as a species they came in and encouraged us to focus perhaps a little bit more on collective well-being. Would you say that?
I'm pretty sure they made it pretty clear that if anyone had the designs of wanting to be a Type 1 civilization, that was going to be a requirement.
Okay, and folks, Type 1 is one of several types that is, I believe, the first stage where we move into more advanced, and we're not even quite there yet, are we?
Oh, we're not even close, no.
Yeah, okay. That was encouraging us to move forward. Thank you, Randy. And was there a second species also that the Marines worked with? Or was the bronze the primary one?
Certainly we have relationships with a number of species, but I would say as far as main technological development, psionic development, sort of the lead ET species on that has always been the bronze ones.
Okay.
But
all right.
We deal with a lot of different species, but I can't think of one other in particular species that would be.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so why don't we start with the insectoids, Antids that you met and dealt with, and kind of just as a reminder, how they look, their speech, their greatest ability or skill set, lifespan, and then I'll remind you of a few more things.
Like indigenous insectoids from Mars, which are probably the ones that I have the most experience with. They basically, to me, look like a tall ant, maybe about 5.5 feet tall. They have ability to make a speech, but they don't really use speech. They're telepathic, so they don't really talk to each other, but they can make a sounds, sort of out of their breathing apparatus, but it's not really speech, and it's definitely not really how they talk. Their main strength is genetic engineering. More often than not, they will genetically engineer another insect of some type to do the job of whatever tool or machine that they might otherwise be thinking of doing. That's sort of their main deal. I don't know. I would say that their exoskeletons were kind of a dark brown. Not really black, but like a dark brown, a deep brown.
Okay. Oh, and you had a funny story about how they view us around the exoskeleton thing.
Oh, yeah. They think it's pretty gross that we wear our insides on our outsides. So for an insect, their exoskeleton is on the outside, and all their squishy bits are on the inside. We have our skeleton on the inside, and we're all squishy bits on the outside. They think that's very bizarre, and they think it's kind of gross.
So they're probably more comfortable with you when you're in your armor, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Way more comfortable when you're wearing a suit of armor. That seems way more natural to them. They're like, you wore your exoskeleton today. So, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Which they are. Body armor is quite literally an exoskeleton. So it's not wrong for them to think of it that way, that we wear an exoskeleton when we go out into battle and so forth, because we do. That's absolutely correct.
And so they were more relatable that way to them. In terms of
yeah, and
our
again, it
physiognomy.
doesn't gross them out as much to see our squishy bits on the outside. So.
And their longevity is what about?
I mean, that's hard to say. I don't know how long a drone lives, but they recycle, so death isn't really death for them. They're hive mind, so a drone dies, it's just going to get hatched out again later. I'm not exactly sure what their process for rememory for some cases is, if it's for everybody or just certain drones or how that works. I'm honestly not sure, but they basically recycle, so I'm not sure what their lifespan is. And I have no idea what the lifespan of a king or a queen would be, but I imagine it's a very, very long time. I would say probably it's got to be thousands of years, but I don't know.
Yeah, and didn't I hear you mention a long time ago the queen is huge? Like
I don't know. I've never got to meet one. And the indigenous the indigenous insectoids on Mars are not matriarchal; they're patriarchal. So they actually have a king. Oh. They are pretty big, from what I understand, but I didn't get to see it. I didn't get to meet the king. I had an anxiety attack and had to go stand outside. So.
Oh, well, that's honest. Well, I know some.
Well, there was a big old giant centipede in the corner, curled up like a kitten, but they're about 20 feet long, and I tended to not really like them. So, it wasn't threatening or anything. It was just like with less than 6 feet away from me, curled up, sleeping, and I was just like, oh shit, I got to go outside and get some fresh air. So I didn't get to go meet the king, but that's okay. That was all right. It's okay. I can deal with that. So
was the centipede like a guard, and it was the centipede something that they engineer, or is it its own species?
The centipedes they engineer, and they're mainly used for combat, and so, they're big, and that, mandibles a meter wide, and, they suck.
Yikes. Well, I can understand why you needed a little break from that then.
For sure.
I did hear, I think it was from another augmented or super soldier, where they were dealing with something. I can't remember if it was Mantids or along the insectoid, and there was a queen, and she was purple in color, I believe, and they said she's like 20 feet long and 10 feet high, so that's pretty big. But I don't know.
Sounds like
I'm
about
not clear
right. That sounds about probably physically proportionately correct. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the species, and I'm just not sure.
Exactly. Now, would you be comfortable? This story cracked me up, but more than that, it shows your ethics and the greater purpose that you were trying to also accomplish, rather than just protecting. It was the dare, I think, your first wife gave you. Your first wife was a Marine. She gave you a dare towards the Antids, didn't she? You know what I'm talking about? You were walking with a small patrol?
we were on patrol. Yeah, we were on patrol, and they were outside, just kind of standing around, kind of like bringing boxes out and laying them out in the sun or something. And they didn't seem to have much interest in what we were doing, and we weren't that far away. And I kind of risked getting a little closer, and they still didn't care. And somehow I just thought, well, I don't know, maybe because there's so few of us, we wouldn't be considered threatening. And I suggested to the squad, I was like, maybe I should just walk up and say hi. And my first wife was like, oh, yeah, do that. I want to see you coming back here carrying your arm and your other arm, screaming. She was like, oh, yeah, I want to see that, because she was precious. And so, anyway, so I did, and basically introduced myself, and the insectoid that was standing there introduced himself back. We had a little chat, and anyway, arranged a meeting.
Did you chat telepathically or what?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I walked up and waved and verbally, said hello, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and yeah, he responded telepathically. So they're pretty mentally strong.
That's very brave of you, and it also shows that it seems like they're not so attacking as they're more defensive. Is that their strategy in general?
For them in particular, that's difficult to say. They have a complex understanding of what's good for them and what's not good for them, so their ethics and their morality aren't based on the same things that ours are. I wouldn't say that makes them bad at all. I would just say that it means that if we presume in some way that they're thinking or judging or determining things in the same reason that we would based on what we think is good or bad is probably not going to be the same decision-making process they would go through. So in my experience, they tended to be situation responsive. So the more aggressive you want to be with them, the more aggressive they'll respond. The more sort of non-aggressive you want to be, the more willing they might be to have a conversation. But I don't understand them well enough to know all the things that they like, don't want, considered good or bad. But I would just strongly suggest that people who think that other species, and some do, but to think that presumably that all of these other species think like we do, have the same value system we do, have the same morals or ethics that we do is just not correct.
That's a good point. Now, what came out of your bravery of going up and starting a conversation, telepathic connection? What came out of that?
Some meetings between diplomats and the Insectoids, so, ended up being a good thing.
Wow. So weren't your higher-ups or your command structure pretty surprised or appreciative?
I mean, a little bit, but, it's whatever. I'm just doing my job. So it was I winged it one day, and it happened to go right, and, yay team.
Yay. And you won the bet.
Okay. Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay, so... and the objects were putting out in the sun or something? You said they were setting stuff out?
Yeah. Apparently, I found out later that they were using the UV in the sun to sterilize instruments or something. So, anyway.
Yeah, that's very clever.
Yeah.
Okay. And have you also telepathized or met a mantid at any time, which to me are different than the Antids?
I'm not sure who exactly you mean by that. I mean, there really aren't too many other insectoid species that I've had conversations with in a casual environment or in a field environment like that. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, people kind of use different terminology interchangeably too, as far as insectoids, mantids, antids, or whatever. And those are terms people are going to have to get a little more clear on when exobiologists come along and straighten people out on that stuff. But yeah, I haven't had too many other diplomatic conversations with insectoid species.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for educating us on that. And are we in active trade with the insectoids? Do we trading any items?
My understanding, my understanding there is. I honestly am not sure what we're trading them for. What we're probably trading them something in large quantities of minerals that would take them longer to gather than we can provide them to them in exchange for some technology or, scientific development program, because that would be the most valuable thing from them is their genetic engineering mastering.
Yes. Okay, great. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the tree frog? I can't pronounce that species. You're going to have to tell me it, but can you tell people a little bit about that? And
the
Trogdobogdians.
Yeah, it's a fun name. The Trogdobogdians. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, Bogdia is a star. Trogd is the name of the planet. So, yeah, they're the Trogdobogdian. It's a fun name. And they evolved from a tree frog species on a pretty big planet, I want to say it's got to be over 3.5, 4 Gs or something like that, in a red star system. So they evolved tree frogs, which, I don't know, if you think about what a tree frog does, it sits in one spot and it stares at things for long, long periods of time. So in some ways, they're kind of predisposed as a species to be really good meditators. So they advanced mentally and psionically pretty quickly because their tree frog genetics made it very easy for them to sit in one spot and stare off into space and go into, altered consciousness states pretty easily. It was pretty easy for them. So they developed pretty quickly. Again, they're very old. They're of the only 2 species that I've ever spoken to that have this age and longevity are the bronze ones and the Trogdobogdians, and they live millions of years. the Bogdians, the one that I talked to was very chatty, offered up a lot of more information than I ever was really asking for. Yeah, I mean, just seemed real. I mean, just I don't know how else to say. When I say chatty Cathy, I mean just someone who was just really eager to answer my questions, provide information, say, oh, I mean, let me answer that for you, and let me explain this to you, and was just very eager to explain, which I felt quite, privileged and graced to be able to hear such information for sure. But yeah, anyway, he was very, very, very really deeply informative. To the point, I mean, this was a completely telepathic conversation. He was providing massive quantities of information. He was talking about swaths of history that lasted millions of years. And so I had a headache for no less than 3-4 days afterwards. It was definitely a strain on my cranium to have that much information pushed into my head in such a very short period of time. So yeah, I had a headache for about 3 days after that, but they're fascinating, absolutely fascinating. They have mastered the ability to build a Dyson sphere ship. So for anyone who doesn't know, a Dyson sphere is a ship that has a star at the middle of it. So the shell of the ship would be the diameter of the orbit of the planet Earth. So if you started building an exterior of a ship where we are now and built it all the way around the sun, contained the entire sun inside of it, so that the interior of it was essentially all in the Goldilocks zone, and the sun is at the middle. So the entire inside of the Dyson sphere at that point becomes habitable, a habitat. So if, for instance, we were to build a spaceship with our sun at the center of it, that was at the position of orbit where the Earth is now, but more roundish instead of oblongish, we would have a surface, livable surface, green grass, trees, livestock, fresh crops, etc., with the sun at the center of it, that would probably easily habitate. Probably more than 200, 300, maybe even more than half a trillion people.
Woo! Wow.
Yeah, a lot.
Wow.
Comfortably spread out with lots of space and elbow room between your neighbors, not packed in like sardines in any way, shape, or form. That's everyone having a lot of personal, comfortable space, and you could still have a half a trillion people habitating the inside of that thing. So then imagine that the ship itself, the fuselage of the ship is fairly thick. It has layers, which has compartments and places that are massive amounts of physical space. That's not just your surface area, sort of livable, habitable, growable space, including the ability to store, build machinery, tools, use magnifiers to magnify the power of the sun as a weapon, so that you can essentially have a cannon that fires from this Dyson sphere ship that's using the power of the sun and could pretty much vaporize an entire planet, in about, a couple seconds.
Ooh. So how long does it take them to build this ship? You said they live millions of years old.
Yeah, millions of years. And I remember asking that question, and the answer was, oh, not long at all, only about 185,000 years.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Yeah.
So they're obviously known for their brilliance and longevity then. And extroversion, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
absolutely.
Are they as agile as the Insectoids are? Because I know the Antids can use like very ambidextrous, can use like 3 or 4 hands at once or something. Are they like that too?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm sorry, who you were talking? The Bogdians, the Trogdobogdians?
Yeah.
So as a evolved tree frog species, they're bipedal. They stand on 2 legs. They have 2 arms. Their fingers are kind of squishy. They do have little suction cups on them. They can grab stuff with them. But yeah, they're definitely very agile. But their head is probably almost 2/3 of the size of their physical body. Their head is huge. So they look a little weird in that sense, that you see this really big head and a really tiny body attached to it, and you're like, what is happening there? But apparently that's sufficient for them. It works for them. The body motors them around and does what it needs to do, and the brain and the head part is more important, but that's where they've evolved. Really big eyes. Really, really big eyes. Like, I mean, I'd say, at least 6 inches in diameter, like 6-7 inches in diameter per eye. They're really big.
Whoa! But
yeah, they're really big.
I love how gregarious they sound in a certain way. At least
they're really cool. I mean, they're really nice. I mean, well, when you kind of think about it, tree frogs aren't predators. And so, they don't really have predator genes. They don't really have predator instincts. They evolved in a way in which their ability to evolve from predators in their own environment was something that they could sort of relatively easily do, and they developed very quickly. So, they've never really had to address sort of naturally aggressive or naturally violent or sort of predatory instincts. That doesn't mean that they can't fight if they feel like there's a good reason to, but they have very calm and very personable demeanor for sure.
Well, they don't need to fight if you own a moving planet, bigger than planet ship that can destroy you immediately. It's probably everyone kind of gives them some space.
To put that in perspective, that's a ship that's as big as like a third of our entire solar system is the ship. It's really big.
God.
It's really, 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 really big. If there was a train that went around the edge of it, I don't know how many weeks or months it would take you to take that train. I mean, it would have to be some ridiculously fast train to get you from point A to point B. We're talking about that distances that are, if you wanted to go halfway around the inside of the sphere, that's the distance of, traveling the width of the planet Earth, 50 times or 100 times to get from that corner to the next corner. It's that big. You wouldn't be able to see from one end to the other. You wouldn't be able to see, it would be the distances would be so far, you wouldn't be able to see the whole thing from the inside of it. It would have its own weather. It would have clouds. It would have rain. It would have lightning. It would have its own weather, sunshine, and breathable air, crops, animals, farms, cities, homes, everything, anything and everything that you could possibly have in a organic, livable environment.
Wow. Well, so one of the most brilliant and advanced, obviously. What about
definitely? They're only that I'm aware of a very, very, very tiny number of species who have mastered this skill to build these ships this big. Very, very few that I'm aware of. So if you can build one of those, you're kind of top dog.
Now we know from zoology and stuff that cephalopods or octopus, I don't know if that's
also
octopuses or octopi.
Octopi and cuttlefish.
Okay.
Anyone who doesn't know anything about cuttlefish. Anyone who doesn't know anything about cuttlefish can pull up a video on cuttlefish. They're incredibly intelligent. They communicate through color. So they literally change the color and I mean not slowly. I mean, they flash colors like rainbow light shows on their skin as they communicate with one another. It's a pretty interesting thing. So they communicate with literally the physical light that changes on their skin is a form of communication. They're incredibly intelligent, super smart brains. They're super, super kind of old, sort of prehistoric kind of species almost, but they're a really, what we know about cephalopods is they are wicked, wicked smart. They're octopi that, live in aquariums that find their way out of their habitats, crawl across the floor and, almost escape out the door. You can you can put a fish in a jar, tighten up the jar super tight, hand it to an octopus, and the octopus will figure out how to open up that jar and get that fish out of it. They're really, really smart. I watched a fishing boat that caught an octopus, and the guys on the fishing boat were trying to figure out how to pick it up or what to do with it. And the octopus found a hole where a drain hole at the edge of the wall of the side of the boat. Mm-hmm. Where that's not the hull. This part of the boat is on the deck. So where there's essentially I'm forgetting my Navy terms, but when you have a
it's okay.
It's like a little wall, but it's not a little wall anyway. And so there's a little tiny hole, and it's maybe 4 inches wide, and it's maybe 2 inches high. And this octopus is, probably could stretch out 6 feet wide. Its head is probably, 9 or 10 inches in diameter. It squeezes an arm through that hole and then squeezes its whole body through that little tiny hole and escapes back out into the ocean. Squeezes its whole body through a hole that's like 2 inches by 4 inches. Yeah, so they have no bones. So they can squeeze through, a tiny little space. They can open up things. They can crawl out of stuff, and they live, outside the water for really extended periods of time. So even though they're an aquatic, species, they have been known to crawl out, and survive for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours outside of the water. So they're incredibly advanced just as a biological animal that we understand them. So species that are based on like cephalopod evolution, brilliantly smart, wicked smart.
Like, did you have a trade agreement with one? Did you ever do a trade?
I mean, we were sitting down having a conversation with some diplomats about a trade agreement, and it was definitely psionic telepathic communication, but they also have a communication scheme that happens with the changing of the color of their skin and so forth. So while we were communicating with them and while we were communicating psionically, you could still see, them changing colors and so forth in a way in which was obviously related to what they were saying. So it had to do with the communication, but it's not like anyone was looking at the color changes going, oh, I totally understand what they're saying in color. But you could see that it was communication and see how it was relevant to what was being said.
Now, is it kind of like the Arrival movie where they showed a octopus ET that was able to do kind of mathematical and symbols and communicate?
So the heptapods in the Arrival were not cephalopods. They're heptapods. Okay. And heptapods, as they define them in the movie, are quite different and are not cephalopods. Heptapods have 6 legs, or is it 6 or 7? I forget. 6 or 7 legs. Octopi, cephalopods do have 8. And the heptapods from the Arrival had fur. They were furry, so they had a mammalian trait to them as far as having external fur on them. But yeah, they had like big long legs that they were walking on. One of my favorite movies, by the way.
Me too. I thought it was so underdone and so beautiful. Don't they have like some ridiculous, like able to reason at warp speeds in their head or something? Aren't they really bright?
They have, I mean, their brains are, I would say, some of the most biologically developed brains, that I'm aware of or that we know of. So they have really, really quick thinking, fast thinking brains for sure. They're very, very brilliant. Very brilliant.
Okay. And what was the trade agreement discussing? What was the exchange with the cephalopod?
I mean, it had something to do. It's something to do with minerals. Something that they had in excess of, something that we had in excess of, that we were trying to negotiate a trade agreement on. Something mineral related. I'm not sure exactly what it was again.
Okay. Avians, bird, avian non-humanoid. You've come across them?
Almost none at all. I mean, I've seen some in passing that seem to be kind of feathery, but not in any way that I would say was obviously bird-like or avian. So I've never seen a bird person or an avian person that seemed like it was like really a bird. I've seen bipedal species who appear to have some feathering on their body, which makes me think that they're, some sort of evolved avian species, but I've had very little contact with them, so it's definitely not my area.
What did their heads look like? I was just curious. So they're bipedal, but they have feathers all over?
No, I wouldn't say all over. That's the other thing. They're not completely feathery. They have feathers, but that doesn't mean that they're completely feathery. Kind of depends on how much clothing they have on or what they're showing and how much you can see. It's not like they're completely covered with feathers. So, yeah. I mean, how would I say? In fact, they looked pretty hybridized, to be honest with you, as far as what was happening with their facial features and what was happening with the feathers. I was releasing some kind of mammalian avian mix there, but I'm honestly not sure. They did not look like any kind of a pure avian or pure bird species. But that's my guesstimation from what I was looking at as a trained observer, not because I have any more familiarity with them than that.
And what about, you obviously dealt with reptilians on Mars. What would you say about their top abilities, their longevity, their skill set, their longevity, their speech, how they look, kind of thing?
They probably would have to stand out as the most formidable psionic warrior species of their stature, meaning of their height and size. Yeah, unquestionably, the most powerful, accomplished psionic warrior species of their stature that I've ever met. Okay.
And on Mars,
I'm not sure about lifespan. I'm not sure about lifespan, other than I think we're talking at least a few centuries, per individual there, but I'm not entirely sure. We never talked about birthdays.
Okay. And super warriors and
the best.
The best, yeah. Were they pretty much the most intimidating ET species you've ever met?
Nope. Not the most intimidating, but not the most intimidating. Maybe the most fierce. The most intimidating were quite a bit taller than that. I mean, they were like 18, 19 feet tall. That's a little more intimidating, when they're big. So.
Whoa. Were those Dracos or some other? What was?
No,
that?
No. Just hillbilly losers that needed their teeth knocked out.
Okay, but were they humanoid or what? Like,
yeah, I mean, roughly. I mean, humanoid is a tricky thing. I'd say that they're like a bipedal mammalian species. I think probably fair to call them, similar to sort of some kind of pre-Adamites or something like that. But they were. Oh, okay. Let's just say they'd gotten off the track, for some time, and they had been living like hill folk for quite a while, and they just needed their teeth knocked out. But they were intimidating because they were big. So they had big swords and big clubs. So something 18 feet tall swings a big club or a big sword at you. It's intimidating.
Whew. So kind of more like giants, obviously, in a way, the way you think of as giants.
Okay. So the intergalactic average height is 16 feet. So an 18-footer would not be considered a giant. An 18-footer would consider to be slightly above average intergalactic height. We're kind of wee. We're a bit on the wee side. And so we're kind of hobbit size. We're kind of hobbit size, really. Like in the intergalactic average, we're kind of hobbit size. So we say giants, but really, that might just be average or slightly above average to us. Because 16, 18 feet is in the average zone for sure. But we're on the wee hobbity side.
That is so cute. Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense because I had dreams of me at 18 feet, so that's pretty interesting, whatever that was about.
Somewhere else. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. What about, have you heard the term diamond spiders, where armor was made from, they either have armor on them, these huge spiders, or made from diamond or something? Does that make any sense to you?
So we're talking about an arachnid species, not an arachnid animal. Okay. an arachnid species that uses some kind of diamond armor or wears some kind of diamondy armor or something like that. Is that what you're trying to describe?
Yes. Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. Like when you say that, I seem to vaguely have a photograph of something that looks like that in my brain. I'm not really sure what the context of it is, though. So whatever my interaction with it must have been very casual. So I don't seem to have any depth of knowledge about that, but I do seem to have a picture of that in my head somewhere. So I'd say I've seen that, but I'm not sure if that was actually I saw it in person or was just in an exobiology class. Could have been just an exobiology class because it seems like it's a static image in my brain, so it doesn't seem to have any movement or dynamic motion to it. So I think it might have been an exobiology class. Sorry, terminal exobiology class, which is how to kill stuff that's not human.
Yeah. Well, there were some Vietnamers, and there were some stories about Angkor Wat being attacked by giant spiders at some point too. I don't know.
So I will say this. I had a chance to work with a Vietnam veteran personally who was having some issues retrieving some combat sort of PTSD memories. So I assisted in the process of helping him walk through that, and he had a very, 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 very clear, vivid memory of being a part of an Army unit who what seems to have happened is that someone disturbed their home, these spiders. They were not happy about it, and came out in kind of fierce numbers. And I can't say this for a fact, but it seems from what I've been told that the entire Vietnam conflict may have been a cover for this war with these spiders. Actually, the entire war may have been a cover for that.
Yeah, I've been told the same thing. That in some relationship to gold too, like retrieving gold.
It's always about gold. It's always about gold. Gold is valuable, but I don't know about that in particular, and I can't say much more just because I haven't had an official conversation with anybody or asked for a briefing on it. But from what he told me, and then when I went to talk to Julian about it, my brigadier, and his response was, yeah, it ended up being a bigger deal than they wanted it to be, and the military action and the cover up for it seemed to have extend far and wide. So anyway.
Okay. Now, what about aquatics? There's so many different kinds. There's the mirror people. There's our cetaceans, whales and dolphins from Sirius, I think B, that were ETs. But didn't you come across at least one unusual, something aquatic beyond that or anything like that?
Well,
did you have to communicate with?
Well, I mean, certainly a few, mostly, again, in, like, diplomatic negotiations, like the Cephalopods. Yeah, most of the time I've spent out of the water. So I can't think of off the top of my head if I had a conversation about that before of what other, like, aquatic species. I mean, I've certainly had some experience with. Well, okay, so it was kind of had a shark body, and it kind of had tentacle arms, and kind of a shark head, and kind of floated upright, like the tail down at the, like almost like a cartoon shark would, like with the tail down at the bottom or at the feet, and like upright with the head sort of facing towards you. It was kind of like that. Yeah, I'm not really sure. No, I mean, it was more like, to be honest, it probably, again, no more than probably between 5 and 6 feet in length. A little tricky to tell because it's floating there, but I'd say it was, about my ish, a little shorter than me, or maybe about my same height. And definitely had the teeth. That must
have been a little weird.
It was. And again, the tentacles, to be honest, seemed like that could have been a genetic engineering addition that could have happened way earlier in their evolution when someone said, these guys need something to manipulate stuff with. Let's give them some tentacles. and replaced a couple of flippers with with tentacles or something. So the tentacles seemed a little out of place, but at the same time didn't look like they were stitched on or something. I mean, it looked part of how they developed and grew and evolved. I'd never seen anything like that on any kind of other fish like that. So my guess, this is just really out of nowhere, that there's some genetic engineering, or again some merging or hybridization of species in there, some mixing of genetics.
Oh, of course. I don't know if people realize how common and how many species play with genetics and hybridization and everything out there.
Let me put it this way. Once a species understands genetics, they'd be stupid not to use them to advance themselves. So most species, once they figure it out, use them to advance themselves, because, again, they'd be stupid not to. So now they don't always do it right. They're not always smart about the way they do it, but it would be absolutely the dumbest thing ever to not use that technology to develop and advance your own species faster. They don't, like I said, don't always do it right, but it would be dumb not to.
Yeah, I agree, because there's just so many that I've studied that are just like always tinkering, always playing with that. And so what do you remember what the shark species was trading or interested in at all when you telepathized with it?
It wasn't a trade agreement discussion, by my understanding. It was what we call an initial contact. An initial contact is more of a casual conversation about who their species are, what they do, what they like to do for fun, what they eat, what's important to them, and we sort of have the same. It's a big get to know you conversation.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's so neat. What about raptors, which of course live in the Earth and also are spacefaring? Do you want to tell people a little bit about that?
Yeah, they're a saurian species, Saurian, like dinosaurian without the dino. And they, my understanding, they're very intelligent, pretty organized species, also better than average warrior species. My understanding is that if in the past, non-raptors wandering into raptor territory could end up finding themselves on the menu. I am to understand perhaps that is no longer the case. Maybe someone high up in the chain of command has said no more eating people, and that's a pretty significant thing if that's true. I don't have a confirmation on that, but that seems pretty interesting, and would also go in line with progressive diplomatic conversations and relationships that we have with them. I got to meet one raptor personally who was a judge, and I had to sign a bunch of stuff, and he asked me some questions, and I had to, raise my right hand and swear some stuff in front of him, and then he signed off and stamped something for me. So that's really my only personal interaction, which was this raptor judge.
Now, was this raptor?
I will say this. I will say I want to sort of add this one point about that, because one of the things that I couldn't stop thinking about the whole time that we were talking is that he had these reading glasses on the end of his nose. And so he would, look down at the papers through his reading glasses and then do that thing, where you look over your reading glasses up at someone in front of you, and it gives you that sort of look. And I guess the learning experience from that was we're not the only species that can get eye strain and need reading glasses.
Wow. Now, I know about two species. I know about the ones that are show up in Jurassic Park movie. And then the ones you're talking about, though, are they bipedal?
To my understanding, they are, yeah.
But the one the judge you saw, for instance, can you describe?
Yeah. Two legs, two arms. Yeah.
Okay. And then the face looks like what?
Well, I mean, kind of a longer neck, longer snout, rounded head. So, I mean, when people say raptors, I get that. I'm not sure that I would say like a velociraptor. I would almost say maybe more like a diplodocus, but that's, me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I know
like a diplodocus with a bigger head.
Okay.
With a bigger cranium.
I know you're exact,
So
So obviously very brilliant.
Very smart. Yeah, very, very psionically developed. The conversation was entirely telepathic. I mean, there was paperwork involved, but the conversation was not a verbal conversation. Mm-hmm. He was obviously very smart, and I was advised before I went in to be very nice and very professional and very respectful and say or do nothing untoward and so forth. So I was told to be on my best behavior, which of course I would be, but it was clear to me that I was to go in on my best behavior and not in any other way. So I behaved myself.
And even though they're telepathic, did you happen to hear them make any natural sounds? You know, did he?
Not really. He kind of kept doing this thing. Like if you've ever heard someone kind of roll their tongue in the back of their mouth and they kind of like that. He kept kind of doing something like that and making a noise like that, but I don't know if it had anything to do with speech or if it was just, him flicking his tongue in his mouth for, whatever reason he was doing that. It didn't seem to be directed towards me, whatever was happening or whatever the noise he was making, so I didn't feel like I should take it personally or even think too much about it. But he seemed to make this sound like he was, rolling his tongue or, kind of clicking or sucking on his tongue in the back of his mouth like someone. I mean, I don't know. I've heard human beings do something similar, so it was something like that. I didn't stop and ask him or look into his mouth, so I'm guessing to the best of my ability.
Well, no, because you were on good behavior, of course.
Exactly. Yes. That would have broke the be on your best behavior rule. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's finish with this. What's the most unusual ET species you've ever met that you can share? Or,
unusual is a pretty interesting. I don't know when you say unusual.
Of course, that's true.
I mean, that's a tricky word, so I'm not exactly sure what's the answer to that as far as unusual. Because what's
how
usual,
about one that
unusual,
got you by surprise? Like really, could be their abilities. It could be a surprised ability or a skill set or anything.
That's a tricky one. Unusual. Okay. So I did meet a mineral-based species, meaning they're not carbon-based. And I'm not even sure they were silicone-based. There was some mineral base of properties that allowed the construction of what are the equivalent of organ cells, fluids that move through a body structure, but the body is a mineral structure. And so the females tend to have this ability to grow their physical form in a way that they want to. They can kind of grow their bodies to be a shape that they want. And so I remember meeting this female of the species in the ambassador when I was hanging with the ambassadorial corps, and she was very attractive. So this is a mineral species that doesn't like breastfeed its young, but she had breasts, and she had this really ornate kind of thing going on the top of her head that sort of looked like coral coming out of the back of their head. And I remember that the senior diplomat later just saying to me, he's like, that's not natural that they look like that. She's choosing to look like that because it makes other species look at her more favorably. So she basically is choosing a more physically attractive, appealing form, mostly to other humanoids, in order to sort of be a better diplomat. So she kind of changed her physical form to alter itself from what her normal sort of figure would be in order to give herself some kind of mammalian female figure, and with the kind of trippy coral hair thing going on, because she knew that it was more visually appealing to certain species, and therefore they would find her they would find her more tolerable to talk to. If in a very
makes total
mechanical
sense.
way, that was her whole point of doing it, was like choosing to appear in a certain way because it was better for her as a diplomat and, you know, got her more conversations with more people that got more productive results because she had boobs and hair.
Mhm. Well, Randy,
but she was gorgeous. But she was absolutely gorgeous. But,
yeah.
but I thought it was super interesting that none of those were like organic features that she was born with. She chose to alter the mineral structure of her body to look that figure,
which is fascinating.
She was absolutely gorgeous. She was absolutely gorgeous, no question. Like absolutely beautifully gorgeous. And again, made out of minerals, so like a sculpted marble statue. To be honest with you, I mean, she was just gorgeous.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Randy. And I know we could go on forever with so many species out there, but I would like you to share with people where they can contact you for sessions, and also talk a little bit about your soon-to-go public psionic class you're offering.
Yeah, my website is www.covertspacecowboy.com. Facebook page is Captain Randy Cramer Facebook page. Either of those places, you can find links to my consulting calendar, links to the psionics class, which is all about psionic self-development, self-mastery. It's a multiple-part, multiple-section course that we're still finishing the curriculum, but we've got the first 2 levels and 8 lessons up at the moment. And I think from what my team member Tim told me yesterday, we're ready to do the full launch to everybody. And we've done sort of the beta class this last month and feel like we've worked enough out that we can throw it forward. But I haven't checked if we've actually hit the super duper launch button as of yet, but any minute now or within the next 24, 48 hours, that should be official. So anyone who wants to get information about that, sign up, email me or whatever, that's the place to get all the links and information to me. www.covertspacecowboy.com.
Great. Well, I'm taking it because I think it's very important to develop our psionic brainwave ability so that we can advance forward, since so many of the other species all use that. Don't you think?
I mean, let me be clear. Not all of them do, but those who do have a distinct advantage. And again, if we ignore distinct advantages, we're being a stupid species. So just like learning to alter our own genetics, which obviously we're doing, my genetics are altered as a species because we've altered our own genetics. But if we don't take advantage of something like psionic development as a species, we're limiting our ability, limiting our scope, and handicapping ourselves in a way that is really, on a species level, stupid. So if we're smart, we'll want to develop those skills. If we're dumb, then we'll do the things that will sort of prevent us from wanting to develop those skills. And I would even go that to an individual level. Smart people will want to develop themselves. Dumb people will somehow want to convince themselves and anybody else that they don't need to develop themselves, or that it's not important, or that they can't. But smart people want to change and develop their psionic abilities. That's the thing.
Great. Well, thank you so much again for your precious time, Randy. I always have a blast with you. And Randy will return in 2 weeks for the last part, where we're going to have a surprise involving what it's like to run an avatar body. So you guys all might want to watch the movie Avatar to prepare for that, and we'll be adding a few other things to it. So thanks so much, Randy.
I'll add one better movie than that. Anyone who wants to really watch a movie about teleoperation needs to watch Surrogates with Bruce Willis.
Oh, cool. Okay. I'll do that.
It's a much more technological conversation. Anyway, have a great one, Merrily. Thank you.
Thank you, love. And everyone else, upward and onward.